Good morning. It's the Liverpool Transfer Daily here on the Blood Red Channel. I'm Guy Clarke. Welcome along. Alongside me, Dave Comerford, as we are today going to discuss the latest rumours involving the Reds, who Liverpool may well have an eye on themselves, as well as Jurgen Klopp's pre-season plans before discussing the rivals and what action they could still yet take in the transfer window. Dave, thanks for joining me. Hope you're well. And as we were saying off air, it's just good that the football, actually some competitive football, albeit don't know exactly your stance on the Community Shield, is going to be returning tomorrow.
Yeah, I think we did a podcast about it yesterday. I think we landed on semi-competitive as the label we were going to go with. Someone was saying that the Community Shield is basically like a 50p, and it's sort of like quite a fitting metaphor in a way, because it's like halfway towards being a competitive game. But yeah, it'll be good. I think it's one of them where you can enjoy it without necessarily, having your weekend ruined if it doesn't go the way you want, which is a nice source of change from what you usually would get in a season. So it eases you into it quite nicely. And it should be, based certainly on what we saw, I think, in 2019 when the two teams met, it should actually be a fairly good game of football too, like decent quality in it.
Yeah, no, that game really did whet the appetite for what was to come that season. Of course, for Liverpool, it went really, really well. So let's hope that that is a precursor for what is to come on Saturday. If you want to get involved in the comment section, do throw any comments or questions in there through the course of the show. We'll try and get to some of them if we can. But Dave, we'll start off on kind of the theme of pre-season. And Jurgen Klopp gave his pre-match press conference ahead of the Community Shield yesterday and mentioned within it kind of how mad packed the schedule is this year, that Liverpool were playing so late into last season and yet have come back so early this year because the season starts early due to the break for the World Cup, that actually even after they've played Fulham, there's plans to have a behind closed doors friendly, we believe, with Aston Villa the day after that, as Liverpool still continue to fine tune. I say ahead of the season, it'll be once it's already begun.
Yeah, so I don't really know if there's actually any precedent for this, to be honest. It's not, we certainly played games during the season before, but whether we'd have one like directly after, the first game, I can't really remember anything like that. So yeah, it's interesting from that point of view. I think you look at it and you see, so you got the Community Shield on Saturday, and then you have the game against Strasbourg, Anfield the day after, and then to have this the next weekend. It's interesting, isn't it? Because it shows the extent to which Klopp is trying to get fitness levels up, not only in the sort of first team, the team he's going to be relying on most of the season, but also kind of throughout the squad. And to have those kind of two pairs of matches is really interesting from that perspective, to be fair. So obviously it'll just be a case of whoever doesn't start or whoever only plays a little bit of time as substitutes in those games will use the other one. So I mean, I think it could point to the fact that Klopp's talked about the sort of shortened pre-season that we've had this season, with obviously the World Cup being in November and December. The season starts a week early, so he's essentially lost a week of pre-season. This seems to be the way he's going about getting that time back. And I think it should pay dividends to Liverpool, really. I can't really see any sort of downside to it, especially, I think, when you've got, players like, we don't know, for example, if Darwin Núñez is going to come straight into the team. The more time he can sort of have on the pitch in the early stages, the better. So, yeah, it's an interesting approach, but one I can definitely see the merits of.
Yeah, especially, I suppose, when you throw in the fact that the Crystal Palace game's on the Monday as well. So basically a free week off the back of that first game with Fulham, actually have a really intense weekend. And then, as I say, got the whole week then to work on other plans on the training ground and maybe a couple of rest days within that before then taking on Crystal Palace the following week. We've got Kumar and Chris have got involved in the chat box, making it part of their morning routine to come and join us here on the Transfer Daily. Do get any comments or questions into us. Let's talk a bit about transfers then. Obviously, we know with Liverpool, they are pretty much set now for what they need to get done, and that extra pre-season game, as it were, that's going to be behind closed doors, probably just some fine-tuning for Jurgen Klopp to really build that cohesion. What are your thoughts on the makeup of the squad now, Dave? Do you think it is set for a full season, or would you sort of still be partial to maybe an addition arriving before the window closes?
I think you look at it and the activity that we have seen, certainly in terms of major incomings, that was Núñez, really. So and like players who would be seen as someone who could be a starter this season. And that was triggered by Sadio Mane asking to leave in really the days after or around the Champions League final, it seems. So obviously a long time ago, really before the summer's even begun in full effect. So I look at that and I think, and then you've got the Carvalho and Ramsey signings, and I think, let's not underestimate how good they are. These are two of the best sort of players in their like respective brackets in the UK, really. So we've got to celebrate those, and I think long term those are going to be deals which either, in the case of Ramsey, I think one that'll probably make Liverpool quite a bit of money a few years down the line, and Carvalho, someone who can potentially be a future starter. So it's good to see the club building long term, and obviously 3 young players have come in. I think to come back to what I said originally, though, the reason we're not seeing maybe more activity is that you haven't had players sort of asking to leave early on. So if Oxlade-Chamberlain had come to Liverpool in sort of June time and said, look, I'm not playing enough football, I want to go somewhere else, try and revive my career a bit, I think Liverpool would have granted that wish, and I think they would have brought in a new midfielder. I don't think it necessarily would have been Jude Bellingham caliber, but maybe another sort of option, really, to kind of refresh that a little bit.
Do you not think part of that's on the club as well as the player, though? Because, I mean, you look at midfield's a great example. We had a podcast with Jamie Carragher at the start of the summer. He said midfield would be the option I look at. I know Carvalho's come in, but that was a deal a long time in the making. It's not really been upgraded, you would say, to this point, albeit I do think Carvalho will surprise a few and play a lot more minutes maybe than outside lookers on are probably thinking and predicting. But Naby Keita's into the final year of his contract. Oxlade-Chamberlain's into the final year of his contract. Mane, of course, was in that position. They waited for him to make the decision. Firmino's there as well. Surely, when you've got 4 players in that situation, maybe the club needs to be proactive in moving one of those on themselves, of saying, look, it's not going to happen here. We'll move you on now, as you say there, for the good of your career, and then invest from there.
Well, first of all, I think the way it's looking, Liverpool are going to probably need to buy 2 midfielders next summer as opposed to just 1. The Carvalho example is an interesting one because he is based on his time at Fulham, and we've seen a few glimpses in pre-season. He is a midfielder, probably long term, but there are kind of some indications as well that he might be used in the front line in the sort of short-term future. So whether the midfield is actually strengthened from that point of view, is up for debate. Probably not. In the immediate term, I personally think Liverpool should have bought a midfielder, definitely, and I think there are a myriad of reasons for that. But I guess I'm just trying to understand it really from the club's perspective in terms of the kind of time frame that they would want to do this kind of business. And I think we saw with Firmino as well, Klopp's comments. I actually made comments about Mane, which could be applied to Firmino. He said, because Sadio came to me so early, that gave the club time to really pick out the replacements, and they didn't feel like it was rushed. And I think that's why you kind of, when you get to a certain point, the club are like, they want everything to be settled really ahead of the new season. And I think there's definitely merit to that approach. And in terms of the out of contract players, I think one thing I actually wrote about for .com a couple of weeks back is that the club seems to be content to let players just leave on free transfers because they think they're going to be more valuable, sort of give what they can give them as a sort of squad role this season, as opposed to, say, you sold Firmino for about 20 million now. He probably thinks Firmino is actually worth more than 20 million to me in a way, if I can use him this season as rotation and as kind of a tactical weapon. So there's a lot of sort of layers to it, I think, but maybe I think the way the club operates is kind of becoming more and more clear as time goes on.
Yeah, no, most definitely. It does feel as though a lot of these things are all planned out a good while in advance, doesn't it? And then they make the moves in the window as and where they see fit and need to. Let's talk about Man City then, Saturday's opponents, and what they're getting up to this summer. They've made a number of moves. Calvin Phillips has arrived, Julian Alvarez, Erling Haaland as well. But there still seems to be a very big shaped hole at left back. João Cancelo will probably start there, but equally is as adept on the right-hand side. They've sold Alexander Zinchenko Zinchenko to Arsenal. A lot of rumours have been going around since the end of last season. They were going to go for Marc Cucurella at Brighton, but the Seagulls are standing firm on their stance that they want at least 50 million for him, the kind of money that City have splashed out on fullbacks in the past. Now they're being linked with Alex Grimaldo from Benfica, probably top of their list. How do you kind of see this going for them? It seems quite strange that they've let so many players go this summer, maybe without having all of them replaced immediately and as quickly, maybe as what Liverpool would act as they showed with Mane and Nunez.
Yeah, it is strange. I think it's strange from a couple of points of view. I mean, to sell players to rivals as well, to give. I know he was in the last year of his contract, but they've given Sterling one of their sort of, I guess, star players over the past
talisman
year.
For them, isn't he?
Yeah, really, has scored quite a lot of big goals for them. They've given him to Chelsea. They've given a couple of players to Arsenal. And obviously, Arsenal probably aren't going to be in the title race this season, but the two players they've given them are still fairly young, kind of mid-20s, around that. So, they could be kind of a factor long term. I think I refuse to believe it's Man City kind of operating poorly. I think it more just shows the level of confidence that they've got with the combination of Pep and their resources, that they can just kind of almost take risks in the transfer market and probably be okay. With the Cucurella thing, what I don't understand about it is it seems like City are trying to almost cultivate a certain image, because you and I both know who owns Man City. I can't really get my head around why they wouldn't just pay up, because Liverpool's approach, we've seen with Nunez, for example, when they really want someone, and these rumours have been going on for a long time, they will pay up. And City are really reluctant, it seems, to pay this sort of extra 10 million for Cucurella to get that over the line. And part of me wonders if it is to do with projecting an image of not necessarily having limitless resources and that being the reason for success. And I think maybe that's the reason, for example, they didn't go for Grealish and Kane last summer, which would have cost about 250 million. Obviously, FFP might come into that too. But I think that is a bit of a sort of recurring pattern, really, of City trying to not look like they're just buying the title, essentially, every time. So the Cucurella one, it'd be interesting to see if that gets resolved for sort of 47, 45 million kind of territory, because that would appear to be between the two clubs' valuations, and I think the player is asked to leave. So I wouldn't rule that one out yet. In terms of, obviously, the alternatives, Grimaldo is a player who, it's almost a bit like Koulibaly in a way, except he's maybe a more extreme example. He seems to have been linked with this big move for such a long time. And maybe you think that it wasn't going to happen at a certain point. But yeah, this could be the summer that it does. And he'd probably be a pretty solid option if they did get him.
Yeah, he's 26. Cucurella 24. He's just turned it as well. As you say, to me, it kind of feels if that was the way they're going to go, and we saw what a season he had at Brighton last year, that he'd be there for the long haul, and he'd probably be a player worth investing in for them. And given City actually look like they're set to turn a profit in the transfer window, which hardly ever seems to happen. I might be wrong there, but that's kind of my perception from them from the outside. As you say, maybe it's trying to change perception of how they do operate. Before we go, let's get into any of your questions and comments, and we've got one here from Kumar, if I can find it. He was asking about Benjamin Sesko, played well against Liverpool for Salzburg the other day. What do you make of him, Dave? Because he took his goal really well in that game.
He did, and he obviously caused our centre-backs quite a few problems in that game. I think the thing which struck me most of all is, I think, his physical attributes, I'd say. Obviously, the finish was really good, but this combination that he has of size, he's really tall, and he also seemed quite quick as well. Maybe similar to maybe similar to Nunez in that respect. I think he's maybe even a bit taller than him, but they can both kind of build up quite a head of steam when they're running. I think with him, it probably won't align for a Liverpool move, which is a shame, but equally, he's going to cost a lot of money by the sounds of it. I think they mentioned in commentary the other day that you could potentially be the most expensive teenager in history. So obviously, Salzburg are really trying to maximise the amount they can get for him. And there's some talk about Manchester United getting them as well. And I think they are probably going to need a new centre forward at some point. So it may be that he's the one they go for. And it'd be interesting to see how quickly he could sort of get up to Premier League level, because again, it feels like a matter of time for him with a big move.
Yeah, it certainly does. Right, that's all we've time for then this morning here on Liverpool Transfer Daily. Thanks for joining us in the chat box. And Dave, thanks for jumping on as well to go through the latest rumours for the Reds as well as their rivals. But from myself, Guy Clarke and Dave Comerford, thanks for joining us here on Blood Red. Until next time, it's bye for now.